everyone's heard the phrase, home is where the heart is, but maybe people should be saying, home is where the horror is. Spooky stuff. You can't understand my speech impediment? What would you do if you went to the bathroom one night and you realized someone was already in there? But then it dawns on you. No one else is awake in the house. So who is in the bathroom? And then we meet a young family struggling with a terrifying house. The landlord said it was perfectly fine. Nothing bad had ever happened here. But his lies may have tragic consequences. Today on Dead Rabbit Radio. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Dead Rabbit Radio. I'm your host, Jason Carpenter. I'm having a great day. I hope you guys are having a great day too. Hope you guys are having tons of fun, whatever you're doing. We got a lot of stuff to cover today. So first off, running to Dead Rabbit Command is one of our live stream contributors from way back in the day. Just making sure you guys got your shout outs running on in. Everyone get on your feet and give it up for Flantasy. Woohoo, yeah! A bunch of flans are flying on in for taking bites. Yum, yum, yum. Truly a Flantasy. Flantasy, it's possibly, maybe he doesn't even like flans. He mistyped his username when he was signing up an account. Flantasy, you're going to be our captain, our pilot this episode. If you guys can't support the Patreon or can't support the live streams, the show financially, I totally understand. I really do. Just help spread the word about Dead Rabbit Radio. That helps out so much. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell everyone you know. Dead Rabbit Radio is your favorite paranormal show. Let's get this party started, Flantasy. I'm going to go ahead and toss you the keys to the Hare hovercraft. We're going to leave behind Dead Rabbit Command, glide us all the way out to Pennsylvania. Let's go ahead and get started here. We're headed out to Pennsylvania. Specifically, we're headed to rural Pennsylvania, the country land of Pennsylvania. We're headed back to the year 1951. So a good 72 years ago. And we're about to meet this little girl. We don't have her name. We'll go ahead and call her Sarah. Sarah, she's 8, and one night she wakes up in the middle of the night. She asks to pee. She wakes up, she's like, oh, my groin. I probably don't have to get that detail. You're like, Jason, I know what urination is. I understand the human mechanisms behind it. She's walking out of her bedroom to go to the bathroom. She's walking down to the bathroom, and she sees the light is on. She can see a little bit of light from underneath the door, and you're like, oh, damn it. I gotta pee. It actually doesn't say how badly she has to pee, because sometimes you wake up in the middle of the night. Well, actually, now that I think about it, if it wakes you up in the middle of the night, that's pretty bad. Usually you don't wake up in the middle of the night, and you're like, oh, that's weird. The sun is set and not risen. I should be asleep, but I have a slight inkling to do a little tinkling, and then you jump out of bed and you go to the bathroom. Usually, if it wakes you up, you've already started, or you're about to start. So she goes down to the bathroom, and someone's already in there. She's sitting there in the hallway, and she hears a tink, 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 tink. She's like, what? Tink, tink. Sounds a little bit like metal on metal. And she's pretty sure none of her family members are robots. She doesn't know where this sound could be coming from. Well, she knows where it's coming from in the bathroom, but what could be causing it is more appropriate. Tink, 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 tink. And she's standing there in the hallway for a bit. And she's like, wait a second, this doesn't make any sense. Like, I understand people go to the bathroom in different time moments, periods, however long it takes you to take the bathroom. Apparently, I'm a robot and my programming is misfiring. People go to the bathroom for different periods of time. But I don't care if it's my dad or my baby sister. I have to go now. No one's coming out. I've been waiting here for a while. I haven't heard the telltale signs of the toilet paper getting hit or the faucet turning on. You know, everything we listen for when we're standing outside of a restroom to go inside. She's not hearing any of that. So she walks up and she knocks on the door. Tink. Tink. Tink, tink, tink. 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 There's no answer. She's knocking on the door, and she still hears the tinking, the clinging of metal on metal, but no one goes, yo, no, I'll be out in a second. So she does really what any of us would have done in this situation. She opens the door, and what she sees is not only not a family member, it's probably the thing you would least expect to find in a bathroom. Or to be fair, any room. You're like, oh, well, that would make sense in the dining room, but the bathroom? Insane. She opens the door and she sees a 2-foot man standing in the bathroom. And she described him as very ugly. In fact, she said he looked like a troll, dressed in what she could identify as peasant clothing. So like scraps of leather stitched onto wool, little wool sweater, pants probably, maybe shorts. Peasant clothing. I wonder if peasants wore shorts now that I think about it, because it was so hot back then. I don't know. Possible shorts. We'll let the historians figure that out. He had a hat. He was wearing buckled shoes, like little leprechaun boots, and had a hammer. And she sees that monstrosity, sees that little goblin man, and she sees what he's doing. He has this hammer, and he keeps hitting a pipe in the bathroom with the hammer. It's like a pipe underneath the sink. He's hitting it with his hammer, and when she opens the door, she's shocked, obviously. No one expected to see this. But the troll spun around and looked at her and said, "Go! Get out! Get out!" And begins motioning with the hammer for her to leave. "Get out! Get out!" And she ran back to her room. Which, again, what most reasonable people would do. 2 feet tall is tall for a, monster. If you walked into your bathroom and there was, a 2-inch tall guy banging on something, and he goes, "Get out! Get out!" I mean, it would scare you, right? I'm not saying you're like, "Oh, I'm so brave," as you have this giant pea spot appearing in your pants. You had to go to the bathroom anyways. But it would be less terrifying. I mean, Chucky's 2 feet tall. You could do a lot of damage at 2 feet tall. 2 inches tall, you can, bite people's toes and poison their drinks. It's a more of, a methodical kill. They gotta send them to make the poison and stuff like that. They're like, "Oh, 10 more bumblebees. 10 more bumblebees to make this potion." The guy's allergic to bumblebees, right? Otherwise, this will just be a delectable honey drink. Anyways, the point is that she ran back to her bed, and she probably peed her pants. It's not included in the narrative, but it's implied, right? She already had to go to the bathroom. A monster appeared in the bathroom. She probably wet her pants, but I'm sure that when she told this story, she hoped no one would ever ask that question. She probably didn't open up the questions anyway. She's like, "Questions, kids?" Because Sarah, who experienced this story back in 1951, she is an aunt now. She's an aunt, and this was posted by her niece, who goes online by the name Goddess in Her Tree. And she goes, my aunt or aunt? My aunt used to tell me this story about what had happened to her, but it's not over yet. At some time later, I'm assuming probably days or weeks later, it wasn't necessarily the next day type of thing, but sometime later, a neighbor was visiting over at Sarah's house, and she was talking to Sarah's mom, and they're just talking about stuff, and then and Sarah happened to be there when the neighbor goes, "Hey, I had a question for you. Why is it late at night I always see that your bathroom light's on?" And the mom goes, "What are you talking about? We don't leave the bathroom light on." And the mom goes, "What are you talking about? We don't leave the bathroom light on all night." And the neighbor goes, "Yeah, we often, if we're up late at night, we usually see your bathroom light on. We always figured, what was that? Is someone, going to the bathroom all the time? Is it an electrical thing? Is the switch not working? That's such a weird thing to always leave your bathroom light on. Is it because Sarah's so scared?" And Sarah goes, "It's the little man! It's the little man!" I guess she had not told her mom or her parents about this. I mean, because, of course, they're not going to believe her. But at this point, when the neighbor's like, "You leave your light on all night long of the bathroom," Sarah starts going, it's the little man. There's a little man in there with a hammer who works on the stuff in the bathroom. It must be him. I saw him one night when I went to go to the bathroom. I saw the bathroom light on. And the neighbor and Sarah's mom just kind of looked at her and began laughing at Sarah and saying, what are you talking about? There's not a troll in the house banging on a pipe with a hammer. And Sarah's like, no, that's why the bathroom light's on, because he's up and he's in our bathroom. And even the neighbor who saw the bathroom light on and knew that that part of the phenomenon was real didn't believe her. She's like, that's foolish, which is interesting because what we do have here is, it's a weird story because we have one person who has no idea that there's anything weird going on, and that's the mom. And then the neighbor, it took long enough, but she saw the bathroom light was on all the time late at night. So she saw part of the phenomenon. She didn't notice something was odd. She didn't know why, and she just brought it up in casual conversation. But Sarah knew why the light was on and what was causing it, and that was that troll. But even the person who'd only seen half the phenomenon, the light being on, thought it was ludicrous. Which, in all fairness, she's right. That is ludicrous that there to be a troll in your bathroom, and that this 8-year-old girl is the only witness to the actual entity. But it's just interesting because, the mom was denying that the light was ever on late at night, even though the neighbor could clearly see that. And this is one of those stories that, I say Sarah was the only witness. This is one of those stories where I am sure she wasn't. I'm sure, because people get up to go to the bathroom late at night. Not all the time, but it happens. I'm sure other people in the family, or maybe even a family previous that lived in this house, saw that. There are governors on what people are willing to believe. Even if someone's doesn't necessarily believe in ghosts, if someone comes to them and says, I think my house is haunted, they may not believe in ghosts themselves, but they'll listen and they'll be like, they'll probably be thinking in their head, there's a rational explanation for this. Like if you're like, yeah, and late at night I hear voices and I sometimes wake up and get out of bed and I feel a cold hand reach out from underneath my bed. You're probably like rationalizing it. If you said, when I wake up in the middle of the night and go to the bathroom, there's a 2-foot troll in my bathroom that doesn't let me use it, between the hours of 10 p.m. and 5 a.m., that same coworker is going to be like, you're absolutely nuts. The only explanation for what you're talking about is insanity. So it's weird, isn't it? Because really, at the end of the day, it's all paranormal phenomenon. But we do have, I'm trying to think of the right word, but limiters, right? Governors. And that's what I mean by that. We don't accept everything, and the people around us don't accept everything. A troll sounds ridiculous in the modern times, even in the 1950s. So what I'm saying is that other people, if the dad of this house went to the bathroom late one night, opened the door and saw a troll there, he's not telling anybody. He's 100% not telling anybody what he saw. He's just going back to bed. He's not going to warn anybody because he doesn't want to admit that he saw a 2-foot troll in peasant clothing with leprechaun shoes in his house. So not that he's scared. Well, he's scared of being laughed at. It's not dangerous. I'm not going to say anything. And that really is interesting because it makes you wonder how much paranormal phenomenon is out there that is so outside the box we just never hear about it. That's one thing I love about doing the shows. We try to find the most obscure stuff. And sometimes we do find stories that no one else is talking about. And we can kind of look at a new type of paranormal phenomenon. The Black Bedrooms is kind of a big part of that. I'll put some of those episodes in the show notes. We've been piecing together this possibly, I want to say quite common, but not quite rare paranormal phenomenon that it happens to people and they go, I don't know what it is. And we don't either. And you wonder how much of this stuff is happening, but because of fear of ridicule, people aren't talking about it. You would not mention this to your friends if you saw a troll in your bathroom. Like, that's a bridge too far. And we all know trolls love bridges. You wouldn't. You would be more likely to say you think your house is haunted. You might even be more likely to say you were abducted by aliens. That's another one that gets people, that makes people super skeptical and opens you up to ridicule. I saw a UFO. No one's going to make fun of you. I was abducted by aliens. People are going to make fun of you. for that. Sadly, I'm not encouraging it. You guys do know I'm pro-bully on this podcast for many reasons, but not pro-bullying when it comes to stuff that I like. I think that's terrible. You shouldn't bully people for stuff that I like. No, just kidding. But yeah, how much paranormal phenomenon is out there we don't learn about because you open a door, you see something that is unexplainable. In this case, childlike. A story from a fairy book. And you just shut the door and go about your business. And don't mention it. Don't tell your friends. Don't tell your family. Nothing. I don't think she was the only one who saw this troll in the house. The mom herself might have seen it. You know? The mom herself might have seen it and was laughing it away, but she knew the truth. She really knew why the lights were on in that bathroom late at night. And only a child would tell that story because only a child wouldn't know the repercussions, the laughter, the anguish of not being believed, even though you knew 100% what you saw. Crazy. Cool story. Really, really enjoy that one. Fantasy, let's go ahead and toss you the keys to the Carpenter copter. Put on that flight suit and fire this bad boy up. We're leaving behind Pennsylvania. Fly us all the way out to a house in the suburbs. We're standing outside this house. And we see a family driving a U-Haul up. Beep, beep. And we see a young woman, we'll call her Caitlin. She steps out of the U-Haul. Her husband gets out, he wipes his brow. He's like, another hot day in whatever city we're in. We don't have an exact location or a year for this story. I'm assuming fairly modern. Mid-2000s forward, 2010, something like that. It's a family about to start a new life in a new home. You have Caitlin, her husband, and 2 toddlers, and they were able to snag this nice house. And the rent was cheap. A little too cheap. A little too good to be true. And they're moving their stuff in. Dad's got the dolly, and he has a bunch of boxes on it. And the toddlers have their dollies. They're carrying dolls. They're moving in. They're meeting the neighbors, and everything seems to be going pretty good. But the neighbors apparently were telling Caitlin and her husband, hey, I know the rent here is really good, but you might want to go somewhere else. You might not want to live here. What are you talking about? Apparently, they had actually spoken to these neighbors beforehand because the neighbors were warning them, this isn't a good place. And they see these 2 little toddlers waddle on into the house and the neighbors are shaking their head. They're like, oh my God, not again, not again. They're like, what? Do you not like babies? No, I love babies. And because I love babies so much, this probably isn't a good house for you guys to move into. Huh? And here's the thing. Imagine this is you. You're moving into a house. You got 2 babies. And the neighbors are telling you not to live there. You would think... Actually, another thing, I don't know what I would do in this situation. I'll have to think about it through the course of this story. Like, what would I do if I was trying to move in and my neighbors are like, The neighbors are trying to tell Caitlin and her husband, we don't think you should live here. But the rent is so good. And here's the thing. They weren't being specific. The neighbors weren't saying, don't live here because it's infested with cockroaches. Don't live here because there's nightly drive-bys and they're only on your house for some weird reason. This house is what gangbangers use to calibrate their weapons. There was no specific reason as to why they shouldn't move in. Just kind of this vague sense of uneasiness. I know it's a good place, it's a great neighborhood. It's not that we don't want you here, but this house is cheap for a reason, basically. But the deal was too good to pass up. Caitlin and the family moves in, and yeah, they did notice some odd things in short order. One, there seemed to be this large stain on the hardwood floor in the bedroom. And it's not something you're going to bring up right away, right? You're renting, you're not buying. It's not a huge deal. But you're going to get curious. You're going to get curious about why there's a massive stain in the master bedroom. And maybe it was something they talked to the landlord about while they were checking out the apartment, because you would hate for the landlord to show up on your last day being like, oh, you caused this. You caused this stain that's been here for 15 years or however long it had been there. The landlord, they were concerned. They go, look at this giant stain. The landlord goes, don't worry about that. A previous tenant, he had a motor. He was working on like a motor for like a boat or a car or something like that, and he took it into the bedroom like a lunk and was fixing it and spilled oil all over the floor. So that does that explain that? Don't look up any court records. Do not read any local newspapers in the past couple of years. Just accept that sometimes people fix motors on the hardwood floor of their bedroom. Their rent is too good to pass up. There was another odd thing that Caitlin and her husband noticed. The bathtub that had a bullet hole in it. It would be alarming to have a bathtub with a bullet hole in it. And even more alarming when you coupled that with a large stain. You could say mysterious, but people do spill oil in rooms. Coincidence? The landlord said the stain was just oil, and I don't think he addressed the bullet hole. He's probably like, yeah, that's clearly from a 357. Don't worry about it. The rent's cheap. After about a year of moving in, they begin to experience phenomenon. And that, it starts off pretty basic, right? It's power. This is something that a lot of people don't understand about the paranormal because they get all their information from movies and books. If you're in a location where cabinets are opening and closing, that's a very high-level ghost. That's usually the first act of a horror movie, and it builds up to something else, and they make it seem like that's normal. No. A normal ghost is smells. It can manifest smells, maybe voices, maybe you can see it. That's a low-level ghost. Those are, if you're going to have any ghosts in your house, that's the type of ghost you want. By the time it's opening and closing things, it's extremely powerful. Extremely powerful. That is not run-of-the-mill. Most hauntings never reach that level. But because of what we see in the media, we go... I mean, at this point, they figure their house probably is haunted. Cabinets are opening and closing. You could be skeptical about it to a certain point, but eventually when you cut off all the options that it's the wind, that it's a faulty hinge, whatever, and it's still happening, you go, okay, this is paranormal. It's probably why the place is so cheap. I'm going to assume the landlord's still telling the truth about the oil and the bullet hole, but I can kind of piece some things together. Super dangerous ghost when it's at that level. Or powerful ghosts, I should say. Maybe not dangerous, but definitely powerful. The movies make it seem like that's normal, and it's not. Normal is just seeing a ghost. Most ghost stories are like that. What happens, though, is that she has her kids, and one of them, we're going to call him Tyler. He's 4 years old. He starts talking about an imaginary friend, who we will call Johnny. Not a big deal, right? Not a big deal. A lot of kids have imaginary friends. Yesterday's episode, we covered a story where it started. Not a big deal. A lot of kids have imaginary friends. Pretty normal. In a haunted house where the phenomenon is just cabinets opening and closing, you may not make the connection that this paranormal friend might be associated with the haunting. Yesterday's episode, we had something similar, but they knew full on that the imaginary friend wasn't imaginary. They had all encountered the ghost when the child began talking to it. This one, I'm kind of letting you know what's happening. This isn't just an imaginary friend. Johnny is not just an imaginary friend. It's actually a spirit in this house that is befriending Tyler. So Johnny and Tyler start hanging out. And Tyler just sees him as a friend. He doesn't really know he's imaginary or a ghost. He's a kid. He doesn't really understand reality. You could probably let it go in any other situation, but what happens is the doors of the house begin to unlock by themselves. And multiple times, Caitlin or her husband would find Tyler standing in the middle of the street, just wandering down the road. Tyler also began to have nightmares about Johnny. Tyler, only 4 years old, would complain about dreaming that Johnny was standing in front of him holding a baby. And Johnny's head would be dripping with blood. It was terrifying. It'd be terrifying to any of us. And it would wake Tyler up. The nightmares were so intense. The fear was just so awful that this required him to be in therapy for several years afterwards. Not just a run-of-the-mill, oh, I'm afraid Freddy Krueger's going to get me, he's going to jump out of the bushes. Like, this is a different type of dream. Almost like a vision into the realm of the dead. That level of realism. Johnny would be standing there, head covered in blood, holding this baby. Caitlin later finds out that multiple murders had occurred in this house. A man killed his wife and their 2 children. So it all comes back full circle. It most likely was a blood stain in the house. The bullet hole in the bathtub. I mean, use your imagination. You can just imagine a horrific event that would happen during. And the idea is that Johnny and the baby were the souls of the dead children that had been killed in that house. This was posted online. It's kind of interesting. It was posted online by someone going by the name Porcelain Lady 921. And it was of a friend of Caitlin's. It was Caitlin's friend had posted this story. And she posted it on this Reddit group called RBI, or Reddit Bureau of Investigation. So the point of the story is not the paranormal activity. So there's some details that I'd love to know. First, like, when did they move out, right? How many nightmares did it take for them to move out? If the rent's so cheap, you could probably tank a lot of cabinets opening and closing, stuff like that. Trolls in your house late at night, you could probably go, yeah, but the rent's so cheap. But how many times would it take for Tyler to be wandering down the road where you go, I know we locked the doors. Like the first couple times, it could have been an accident. One of the doors could have been left unlocked. We're just not thinking. But we were really good after it happened once or twice to make sure those doors are locked. They're still getting unlocked. Tyler's walking down the street. And really, for me, the idea is that this is the way I read this, was that something was trying to kill Tyler. See, another thing you see in the movies, which is very rare in real ghost reports, is people being killed by spirits. It's extremely rare. Like, I've been doing this for 30 years, researching the paranormal. I've come across less than a dozen. Honestly, probably less than 6 or 7. Where a ghost has actually verifiably killed somebody. They just don't have that level of power. But you can create a situation that's dangerous to somebody. Letting a child walk down the street. Encouraging a child to do dangerous things. Stand on windowsills. Climb up on the roof. Things like that. But actually, like, strangling a human is super rare. It's incredibly rare. In the movies, it happens all the time, so we just assume those stories. That's just made up stuff for Hollywood. Or horror novels. But I think that was the impression. A ghost may not, and I don't think it's a ban on killing them. I don't think it's any sort of moral or spiritual law keeping them from killing them. I don't think they have the raw power to do it. But they have the ability to unlock a door. Because, of course, if they're opening cabinets, if they're at that power level, they could totally unlock a door. So you can let a kid walk down the street. And so it's possible that Johnny was trying to get Tyler killed so he'd have a new friend to play with in this house. which is how I read that. And he was coming to Tyler in the dreams, presenting himself as this bloody child holding baby. I mean, horrific. We don't know when this family moved out. They did move out at some point, but we don't know if, like, what the final straw was. Did they move out because of the dreams? Did they move out because they're afraid Tyler was going to get run over by a car? Did they move out because of the rent went up and maybe it wasn't so cheap anymore? I don't know. But it was interesting because it wasn't posted on a paranormal board. It was posted on the Reddit Bureau of Investigation. And this friend... So here's the thing. This is the thing. I think it's a very interesting ghost story to just look at. It's terrifying. You have this little boy having this encounter with a malevolent being. I don't think it was letting Tyler out of the house because he's like, what? You should enjoy nature. I think it was to hurt or kill Tyler. Whether or not he was a decent human child when he was alive, whether or not obviously he didn't deserve that death at the hands of his father. That's absolutely tragic. But after he was a spirit, he was doing malevolent things. That's another thing we talked about on yesterday's episode. Why are ghosts so scary? It turns out that they may just be so scared themselves, trapped in this realm between the living and the dead, that they're scared themselves, so they cause other people to be scared. And I think they do want, some of them want companionship, want the living to come over and join them in their misery. But what I find interesting too about this story, like we have that, I found this so, I don't want to say it was infuriating, but it was just kind of like gobsmacked would probably be a good way to put this. So a friend posted this story. She went by the name Porcelain Lady 921. Caitlin's friend, and she posted it on the Reddit Bureau of Investigation because she wanted to know more about this house. She wanted to know, is there any way I could find the crime reports? I kind of want to know about the house and the crime and all of this stuff. And that's why I figure the family doesn't live there anymore, because she doesn't seem to have like the exact address to this house. I think that they've moved on. She wants to find more about all of this story. And then someone else posted in the comments saying, this sounds stupid, but I want to buy my own haunted house someday. And Porcelain Lady responded, it's not stupid. I've wanted my own ghost since always. And the Capture Cosmos is the guy who posted, this sounds stupid, but I want to buy... It does sound stupid. It is stupid. And I would argue that in a void, you can have a haunted house. If you know the idea of haunted houses, I know people who've lived in haunted houses, they're perfectly fine with it. Whatever. I'm not judging them. Sorry, you're like, oh, you're about to close the deal. You're like, I'm about to buy this house. But first, one more episode of Dead Rabbit Radio. You're signing the contract. You go, oh, it's stupid. No. The ghost is finalizing your signature. Here's my thing. What I find so irritating about this is that willingly moving into a haunted house is super dangerous. It's more dangerous than I think you can imagine. It's the same thing between getting into a toxic relationship with somebody versus looking for a toxic relationship. We've all been in relationships that haven't worked out. And 99.9% of the time, we got tricked in the beginning. We didn't see any of the warning signs. We didn't know what we were getting into. Maybe it took a couple weeks, a couple months, a couple years. But eventually we're like, we're out. This is bad. Versus, you see all the warning signs, you see all the red flags, and that's why you start dating them in the first place. Because you are going into a toxic relationship, whether it is with another human or with an entity, and they will feed off all of your wants and desires. You will energize it to a level more than a family moving into a house and it turns out to be haunted. And them learning to live with the ghost. versus you looking for a haunted house and you're like, yeah, I can't wait. Oh, it's going. You're the psychic energy that's just leeching off of you constantly. This ghost may have been a completely normal specter. It could be scared, it could be sad, it could have its own baggage, but you will energize it to such a degree that it will become fat on your soul. It will gobble it up whether it wants to or not, and then it will develop a taste for it. I don't think it's good to go out looking for haunted places to live in, because you're bringing a totally different energy there, as opposed to someone who finds himself in a haunted house. It's the same thing. If you find yourself looking for the red flags in people, you will feed into their worst, most base instincts. You could also argue the whole idea of treating a ghost, which at the end of the day is a human spirit, as a pet, as a novelty. Whether or not it's good or bad, it still was once a human. And you're basically treating it as a party trick. There's that level to it. But here, this combination kind of set me off. Because this is not a story about my friend had a haunted house, she lived in it, she grew up in it. Every so often she would see a little boy running down the hallway. Cabinets would swing open, television didn't work. A couple times late at night, they would see him underneath their bed. And then it all culminated where eventually her little sister started having nightmares about the boy, but eventually they moved away and never saw him again. That's one story, and that's a very typical ghost story. The nightmares I added on just to be spooky. Normally it's grew up in a haunted house, I'd hear weird noises, maybe I'd see something standing in the closet. I was unsettled by going up into my old grandma's room, which hadn't been occupied for a couple of years. I didn't feel welcome up there. Every time I walked by the door, I'd hear something on the other side. And eventually we moved. That's a normal ghost story. That's like 90% of ghost stories. That's not what she's talking about. She's saying, my friend had a haunted house that was the site of a triple homicide that also almost killed my friend's son. I want a ghost. Super, super dangerous. Like, this is such a rarity type of ghost story. Here's the thing, we cover them all the time on this podcast. I have to spend hours to find a story like this. You may go, Jason, you just covered a story like this yesterday. You cover stories like this, on the regular. It takes me hours and hours and hours of reading a week to find stuff like this. They're very rare. We've been on a ghost binge lately. I love ghosts. The show's become very ghost heavy. I hope you guys are okay with that. But they're still rare in the overall thing, and so she's seeing this horrific event, hearing about it, and still thinking, oh, I want a ghost. Let's look at it this way. This is a good analogy. A man adopts a pit bull puppy. His friend has some pit bulls, and they have a litter, and they need to get rid of him. And the guy's like, well, okay, I'll adopt this little pit bull puppy. And he doesn't know much about pit bulls. He doesn't watch the news. He takes his pit bull home, and he never expected to be a dog person, but he finds himself loving this puppy. And eventually, the dog turns into a handsome pit bull. He treats him right. The owner treats him right. Has no real expectations of this dog. Puts him on a leash, takes him for walks, treats him like he would any other pet. Loves him. Definitely loves him dearly. But he has this pit bull, this adult pit bull, versus somebody who his friend goes, hey, I have this litter of pit bulls, and this dude goes, yeah, oh no, I totally want a pit bull. I will take one of those. And this guy, he loves the fact that these dogs are feared. They're very ferocious. He sat and watched cartel videos where people have been attacked by pit bull dogs and watched all this crazy stuff about what a pit bull's capable of, the pain they're able to endure and still attack their opponents. How do you think that guy's going to treat his pit bull? It's the same puppy. It's the exact same puppy. But the guy who's into the very dark aspects of the pit bull versus the guy who didn't even want a pit bull, how do you think they're going to treat their puppies? And to me, that's the difference between a family moving into a house and it turning out to be haunted versus someone looking for a haunted house to live in because they think it's cool. You will give a different energy to that house. You really, really will. And I think it would be 10 times worse if you hear a story. I mean, you're hearing it from your friend about a ghost trying to murder a 4-year-old boy and still wanting a ghost, still wanting to live in a haunted house. You're going to move into that haunted house and you're going to want cabinets to swing open and close. You're going to want the light. You're going to want the most extreme level of poltergeist activity. You're going to want what you see in the movies. And you're going to get it. You're going to get it because you're going to be feeding into it. You're going to power this ghost up, and you may be like, no, that's the cool part, you see. No, I don't want just a haunted house. I want to have it where I can communicate with it, and I say goodnight to it each night, and it's turning on stuff. It's like Siri, but a ghost. My friends come over, and they're all freaked out because they can hear scuttling upstairs when no one's there. It'll be awesome. You're feeding it your negative expectations. I would say most people's encounters with ghosts should be to either help them leave or live peacefully with them. Don't expect anything from them. Don't try to communicate with them on any sort of level. Either help them leave or respect their presence like you would want your presence respected. I think that's the best course of action. If you're instigating stuff, you are giving them your energy. You are giving them pieces of your psychic core. And eventually, they take little nibbles at first. You're kind of teasing them. And then eventually, they're just taking big gulps out of you. It does not end well if you mess around with this stuff. It will not end well. It won't end well for her. It won't end well for anybody if you keep pushing this. And if the idea that you could hear a story, a first-person story from your friend saying, yeah, my son was deeply traumatized by what was going on in this house. It was haunted. It started off small, and the next thing we know, my son was wandering around in the middle of the street. He's having these horrible nightmares, and we found out there was a triple homicide here, and then you still going, I want a ghost. I want a ghost. That sounds fantastic. That's just nuts. And really, it's more than nuts. It's dangerous. It's dangerous. You get what you want, right? Like, that's part of the universe. You go looking for it, eventually you're going to find it. And I would say you could be in the position where you move into a house that's not quote-unquote haunted, and you make it haunted. Because if something out there in the universe wants to suck out your soul, wants to destroy your life, it will pose as a ghost. If it knows you're looking for that, it will pose as a ghost. You will think it is this charming little boy dressed in clothing from the 1920s. He was an orphan who died in your house. No, it's not. It's something else. It's something darker than that. But it knows that's what you're looking for, and it knows that you're going to accept it, and you're going to interact with it. And you're going to brag about it. You're going to learn its name and tell all your friends about the ghost in your house and all the cool things he does. Sometimes I come home and all of my silverware is on the floor of the kitchen. Would you like to come over for dinner? We eat with chopsticks now. It's taken energy from you 100%, and you really got to be careful of how much you give to it. But if you're calling out for it, it's going to take every bit of you. Every bit. Until there's nothing left but a husk. Super, super dangerous stuff. People mess with it all the time. I encourage people to go ghost hunting. I encourage stuff like that. I find it really awesome. I think it's a great social hobby as well. You meet other people. But there's a big difference between going out to a location and making that location your home. A huge difference. People still do it, though. Truly dangerous. I say that a lot of ghosts don't do crazy stuff, don't open cabinets, they just kind of appear. That's because that's what they can do. But if you continue to give them your psychic energy, if you let them leech that off of you, sky's the limit. These are entities from beyond are reality. They may have used to be human, but they're not anymore. I still give them the respect I would give a human, but you can't mess with them. And again, if you're calling out for one, if you really want a ghost, what answers that call may not be human. It may be demonic. And at that point, I mean, those things can kill you. And finally, you get your wish. Your house is haunted. The problem is, the ghost is you. DeadRabbitRadio@gmail.com is going to be our email address. You can also hit us up at Facebook.com/DeadRabbitRadio. TikTok is @DeadRabbitRadio. Dead Rabbit Radio is the daily paranormal, conspiracy, and true crime podcast. You don't have to listen to it every day, but I'm so glad you listened to it today. Have a great one, guys.